The professional, very bilingual. Blow shit out the frame, aim at the stack quo.
Peace, human families of the planet Earth. I'm your host, Aseer the Duke of Tears. You're now tuned to Super Heru Radio, along with my co-host, Selena, the Empress of 10,000 Years, Saga Assad, my brothers, Amor, the Prince of Tears, and all of you wonderful people who have been holding us down for the past, it'll be about 5 years now, right? 5 years, 4 years, somewhere. Yeah, so we just want to say love and light and give respect and praise to that which is right. And we want to let everybody know that the time is definitely upon us in terms of a lot of the interesting things that are taking place in the world and how these things are actually interplaying in terms of us. And whether we realize it or not, putting us in positions to really make something really happen. You know, there's a subtle coup d'etat, you know what I mean, trying to go down, where you got members within the so-called United States government trying to do things to usurp their position amongst those who they really have no jurisdiction over, as well as those traitors that they have complicit in our in this country, in their country, as well as in ours, that are working to specifically disenfranchise a lot of different people out of their birthrights inheritance. And what that does is that further puts us farther away from our ultimate goal. And because our ultimate goal is to substantiate our empire, we now fall in positions of having to catch up to what we see other people doing with some of the things that we have already put out there. So if you ever know what it's like for you to be doing something and then somebody else come in and then don't give you the credit for doing it, but they try to do it in a manner that they've seen you popping off with, apply that now to a whole people in the country. It's like we got to really do the knowledge that what has been happening to us, whether it has been self-perpetuated or not, is something that is the most diabolical thing that was ever done to any people on the planet. You know what I mean? Like, I've heard about taking people's land. Like, we all familiar with the devil. You know, they doing that type of stuff. You know, land grabs, stealing people's lands, all of that. But it's something else, man, when you have a people who have been forcibly put under a amnesiac spell that has disenfranchised them from their very souls, man. And no other nation has had that done to them. The only reason why, and I know some people might take offense, you know what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to do that, but I grew up in this country, and people have been telling me, you know what I mean, I'm never supposed to forget the Holocaust, you know what I'm saying, and I'm not even a Jew. But what I peep is how all of these people want you and I to just always get over what is continuously happening to us. You know what I'm saying? How, because there's so much information now about who and what we are, that it's almost made certain people stupid. It's almost made niggas to the point where they don't even, they want to be so inclined to just not miss nothing that they want to claim everything, and even shit that has nothing to do with them. You know what I'm saying? They trying to claim stuff that has nothing to do with them not only being Moors, but them being who they are, period. You know what I'm saying? And unfortunately, like I said, we get in positions where all of this is then flipped up, you know? And what happens is you got people that's working diligently, you know what I mean, to be against anything that you say you are with adamancy or directness. You know what I'm saying? If it's not in the context of what they have come to associate with as being relevant or being that which is significant to the upward mobility for our people? They don't want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? It's not right. We are the only people who have had any trace of their true existence totally buried, man. You know what I'm saying? That's why they bug out so much when they see you and me now. Because they like, yo, well, how is it that this dude or these people got this knowledge or whatever, but they not in that position? And why should we acknowledge them if they don't acknowledge themselves? And you know what? They right. You don't ever hear no Jewish person debating or not whether or not they Jewish, and they know they not. You know what I'm saying? These people who in the Bible it says those who call the Bible say woe to those who call themselves a Jew, right? But they don't say that about being Hebrew or being a Moor or Canaanite or whatever. But regardless of that even being said, at least when you ask them what their nationality is or whatever, they're going to tell you. What their religion is, they're going to tell you. You understand that it is the year 2013 and you have black people still worshiping an image that has nothing, that does not look like them? Now, black folks ain't the only ones doing this. I mean, you got other people doing that too. You know what I mean? You got Caucasian people and things like that. You got people doing that type of stuff. And this ain't to bash nobody, because we can't forget that we came out of a situation like that too not too long ago where we thought things was one way and they happened to be something totally different. But what I am saying is there's also something else going on where we can't seem to identify or coalesce behind one central thought or one central idea. Now, regards to whether or not, thank you. So we again come from a people that's so old that we basically forgot how old we are. We forgot who and what we are or where we came from as a people. That's how long we done been here. But like I said, the problem with all of that being said is the fact that when you manifest out of a people that are timeless, and if you live in a finite, who are infinite, but they tend to live in a finite situation, then what happens is you either are going to raise your vibration up or you're going to slow your vibration down to be able to get people, like I said, to create a space for you to exist unfettered by what they perceive you as. You got to understand, everything that's happening to you in the negative is based upon the perception that people have of you. Not who you are, not what you've done, but the basic erroneous perception that was created for you or put on you by members of this so-called government as well as your family. Now, this don't mean that, you know what I'm saying, your family and all of that is totally negative and these niggas, they don't want to see you come up. Well, it's more along the lines of misery love company. And unfortunately, we have not reconciled the aspect of our reunification because we are not, again, unified, because we have all of these different understandings of what we're supposed to do. Like right now, you got Moors that's still pumping this whole idea that we are somehow part of the United States government. The prophet ain't never say that, man. All of that, you part and parcel, that term or that word parcel was invented in the 1600s after the capitulation of Grenada and was used as a quasi-adjective to allow people who had no access or corridor or connection to indigenous or autonomous governments to feel like we were somehow all in league together, that we somehow, like, when we freed them, that they somehow was on the same level of us. Let me tell you something. If you are the debtor and this person, if you are the creditor and this person is the debtor, then that means that you cannot be on that person's level until you become a creditor, therefore coming out of the debtor. So what that means is that slaves don't free themselves. Slaves, I'm not even talking UCC right now. Slaves have no equity because the chat thing. Slaves have no equity because slaves are equity. You see what I'm saying? So you can't be something that you aren't. So ask yourself this. If all United States citizens are 14th Amendment citizens, and a 14th Amendment citizen is a form of chattel, right? Then how is it, and chattel mean property, how is it then that property can own property? It's not like the cow can own the rope that's tying it to the fence, right? So if they got you listed as a Negro, Black, Indian, colored, or whatever, but then at the same time you are holding on to property, how is it that the slave, something that is owned, can own something? That's not true. That can't happen, not in commerce, not in law. Again, think about what I'm saying. I'm saying if a 14th Amendment citizen is technically a slave, right, then how can a 14th Amendment citizen who is a slave own slaves or own property? Since when have you ever heard of a master giving a slave property other than what happened into this so-called founding of this United States? And we didn't even give them nothing. We just gave them the room to help free themselves. And because they pledged fealty to us, we let them do that. But we didn't give them nothing. Therefore, they were not part and or could not be part and parcel of a country that they were under the jurisdiction of. You understand, you are not, when they talk about the British and all of that, they're talking about your family. The original Moors from Europa was coming back over here to re-legitimize themselves. And this was going back from the ancient agreement made from the Moabites, right, who wanted to come back over here and live amongst us. And then we say you could do that, but if you're coming back into the blood, then you have to protect and respect the blood. This is where the red flag with the green star come in. Because that's the flag that represents the Moabs and the Amoroccan Empire that wanted to come back over here from when they left over here during the times of Ham. But when you read the Circle 7 Quran, peace be upon him to the prophet, he told you that Ham left, that Cush left before Ham. So that means that there was two sets of people who left this side of the world to go over there. And even though Cush was the son of Ham, Cush was not down with the whole Hamite aspect of what was happening due to the leprosy faction and the connection to the Yaqub thing, which would explain his exodus. See, the migration from this side of the world to the other side of the world was to reunify the empire. That's why we didn't have to build no demarcation line. The only demarcation line was so-called Ethiopia, and that was to separate the land of the father and the son. The father being Ham, the son being Cush. But as the Circle 7 Quran says, there never was a time when man was not. Because if there ever was, then there would be a time when man would not be. You see? So, where does the whole aspect of the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 tribes of Judah, where does all of that come in? Well, if we look at those 12 strands of DNA represented in those 12 tribes, each tribe representing one of the zodiac signs, then we would see that these 12 tribes were chosen because these were the ones that were chosen to go through the situation. When I say the situation, I'm talking about, the whole Yaqub thing. But in that, through their genetics, derived the fall of the ancient Moroccan, the Al-Moroccan Empire and the rise of the original Moors back in a proper person would come from this. But again, you can't build without destroying something. And the actual aspect of what's happening is that what has really been destroyed is our ability to speak to each other in our own language. But I'm not talking your language being English or Latin or Spanish. I'm talking about your language being who and what you really are. Your original name. Not the name and not the dialect. I'm talking about the language of love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality. People don't speak that language no more. But this was the language that this system that we are talking about, the United States, was founded on or under, whether people want to believe it or not. So because the prophet has certain things in line, you have other people that wanted to come along and flip it and bounce it and put their version of what he was saying in the game. And everything is up for interpretation. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to say that people can't interpret or misinterpret what the prophet is saying, but what I'm saying is that when your heart is in the right place and you functioning from the tenets of the original isonomy, love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality, you know what I mean? Blood, fire, water, earth, and spirit, gold and spirit, then you functioning from the level where you are not letting the ego dictate what was to be said. Now you can divine the clear understanding of it because you're not trying to set yourself up to be the man. Because the man already set you up to be that. Noble Ali said, for instance, he said the European is your fellow man, right? He didn't say he was your brother. He never said that. But when we say European, we got to strip that down. You know what I'm saying? When the prophet said that when the Europeans got here, they saw Moors living up and down in Mississippi, those Europeans that he talking about is not necessarily Caucasian people. They talking about Moors from Europa who met other Moors from over here speaking that. But the difference is those Moors from Europa had white slaves with them, and they had a practice of amalgamation. They was into that. We wasn't really into that over here. They was into that over there. Due to the fact that most of the outcropping of races that developed out of the Yacobian program, most of them settled in what's called the Old World. Only the ones that wanted to deal with us and function in the realm of the light knew about this place. That's why no matter what anybody tell you, it wasn't until the capitulation of Granada that Cortez and them was able to get to America. Because Granada and the Moors from Granada was really accessible, or a contingent of Moors from over here that left over here, went back to the interior of what we call North Africa, recruited indigenous Moors from North Africa, meaning over here and over there, and then Tariq and them took them back up into the ancient lands of Carthage, which is now Sardinia, what we call southern Spain. But when the prophet said that the European was your fellow man, the Moor hit me up and was like, nah. You got to understand what the word, we got to look at the word and look at the word fellow. So there's a group of so-called Masons that Castro was part of called the Odd Fellows, right? So a fellow, right, is someone who, it can mean someone who is, it can mean like to tie or to connect or to be associated with, right? That's why you have something in Freemasonry called the fellow craft, right? Now, the word craft in modern terms or pseudo-modern terms can be construed to mean trick or to make over or to redistribute or make into something else or to lie or to trick, right? So when you hear people talk about the craft, you see what I'm saying? That's something different. So because we look further into it, right? So a fellow can be a companion, you know, it can be one person of the same kind, it can be a shepherd, right? But once you get down to the further meaning, one meaning that's very interesting is that the sixth meaning, actually, the sixth meaning of fellow, or the sixth definition of the word fellow in order, is an appellation of contempt. A man without good breeding or worth, an ignoble man, meaning as a mean fellow. The last definition of it is very interesting because the last one says that the word means corporation. You know what I'm saying? So, when we now start speaking about the craft, those good fellows who may be down with it and whatever, this is showing and proving to you why Masonry or Freemasonry is not for you. That was created for the European, to learn how to be like you, to learn how to take aspects in who and what you are, and then celebrate that now that you're gone. Now that you're gone. So you could be you so long as you're not being you around me. You know what I'm saying? So then when you do the knowledge to that, and you start paying attention now to the, yes, I'm on. That creates a schism now because we have been taught that, for lack of a better term, that that the Freemasonry, like I said, is the part that we're supposed to be dealing with because that's supposed to teach us about how to be chivalrous and all this other stuff, right? And that's all well and good if you are at the stage in your life where you feel that the knowledge that you will receive by those degrees will allow you to get what you're supposed to get. But that's really rarely, very rarely, seldom the case. The true proponents of that are those people, I think, who are also going through a transition or a transitional phase within themselves. Because a lot of people get into it just for legacy purposes. They don't really know the arcane history of what they're dealing with. And that's the problem with living in the United States, is that you are not living in the real world. Now you know you're not living in the real world because you could turn on the TV and watch people getting bombed up and blown up and all that other type of shit, and you see U.S. soldiers doing all of that, killing all these people. The people you feel sorry for, or the people that they feel sorry for, is the troops. Right? I don't support the war, but I support the troops. Now, I'm not telling you not to support troops. I'm not telling you not to support somebody. I'm just telling you that we're coming to a phase in the evolution of mankind where falsehoods cannot withstand the weight of their own scrutiny. So, having so-called sovereignty, this is the word that people want to use, having so-called sovereignty, right, with no real government or real government connection. I'm not talking about the quasi-affiliation because there's different aspects. Moorally Temple of America, you know what I mean, is the doorway for the divine and national movement. The divine and national movement is something that cannot be qualified in an earthly designation. Cannot function or come in a direct way like that. Everything in the United States got to come through some sort of transmitting utility. Everything in the United States got to come from a place where people are not in their right person. Because if they were in their right person, then they wouldn't be here. Based upon the laws, again, of, I would say the law of the land, right? But the law of the land is common law. And to deal in the common law in the United States, that has to go through a special proceeding. See what I'm saying? Because all United States courts dealing in the United States are commercial courts, all of them. So the only way that you could come out and not be tried or go to a so-called court is to change the venue of the court before you get there. Then you don't have to challenge no jurisdiction, because the jurisdiction has already been ratified based on the fact that you know who and what you are. But who and what you are is really based upon where you at. You know what I mean? If you don't know where you at, then it's subject. So if you don't know where you at, you're subject to disorientation or reorientation. You see what I'm saying? Disorientation is not knowing, again, where you're oriented, where you begin from, or where you're situated. Reorientation then is the re-education or the reinsertion of a new identity over the old. And just to keep it extra funky, they then have a Freemasonic order that is then dedicated to this disorient and reorientation. This order is called the Grand Orient, Temple Orientalis. This order was downgraded into something called the Order of the Golden Dawn. So it started as a French order. Actually, it started as a German order when it was Moors. Then it was moved to France with the Templars. Then it was co-opted by the so-called aspects of what we call the so-called Scottish Rite. So it's all working in tandem to keep the idea of who the true prince and the true knights and all of that really is. Because when you become a Freemason and you go through that ritual, you're going through an aspect of the craft. Come on. No, you said, I love you. I'll come out on you later when you sleep. Go to sleep. Good night. Good night, buddy. Look. So it becomes a situation where once the candidate or the entered apprentice has to go through a form of disorientation. That's why they put the blindfold on you. You see what I'm saying? That's why they make you wear different clothes. You don't know where them clothes came from. You don't know what's on them clothes. You don't know how many broken spirits, them put them rags on. And then you put a rope around your own neck, which is the necktie, which is what the necktie symbolizes in regular formal wear. That's the noose that you adjust to the size of your neck, because you have to wrap it around the collar, right, which is either a priest collar if you're in the craft, but if you're not in the craft, it's symbolized as a dog collar, in which then the cable toe, which is the necktie, then becomes a leash. Hence, God spelled backwards is dog. See what I'm saying? Then you go through the whole thing where they hit you in the head and then, put the sword on your chest or throw you in the air or make you walk over rocks where you stumbling and falling. But the thing about this is that they have gone through it, but in this particular instance, they're not going through it with you. They're watching you go through it. So essentially what that means is that they're playing a trick on you, in which they know what's going on, but you don't. Therefore, you being punked. It's like candid camera to a certain degree. It's theater. You understand? It's orchestration. It's pomp. And then after you've been disoriented and you finally go through the whole thing, you accept all the oaths and the obligations, then you get reoriented when they give you the light, meaning when they take the blindfold off of you now, And now they say that these are the new eyes that you see in the world from. Therefore, in a sense, what has happened is they're putting you through a situation where the lodge becomes the mother, and you are now birthed into this new dead life as its child or its kid, right? A kid is what? A baby goat, right? So you come out of the Orient, which is the East, right? That means the perpetual East or the perpetual West, which means the true empire. So you come out of the East or the Orient, then you go into be disoriented in terms of the ritual, then you get reoriented, right? Then after you get reoriented, you are now put into the Orientalis, the order of this new secret, right, that you don't really understand, but you now are a keeper of. And then now you become part of the Grand Orient, which is the new face of the perpetual empire being peopled by people acting and dressing in aspects of how and was we are, but they are not, because we are dead. But because they have to and be charged with the custodialship, they, for whatever reason, maintain the ritual. The metaphysical aspect of this whole occurrence is to retard the spirit's true ancestry and true attachment to the dominion by creating yet another block in the form of this non-physical, incorporeal oath that you are now responsible for, which is really an oath against yourself. So those who fell low wound up on the ship, you see what I'm saying, of brotherhood, which then set sail on the high seas beyond the sea to then create an alternate reality, if you will, that now consists of mirror images of who and what we really are, instead of being who and what we really are. To create a world where people think that when people see you walking down the street wearing a fez or something like that, without writing or whatever on it, they no longer associate you as your real self and your real nation and your real nationality. They associate you to a fraternal organization or a club, whose white and black lodges essentially work together to retard the true element of what it was. See, the Prophet was coming to basically set it up where you would go back to a system. And these things, these so-called fraternal organizations will become almost like the Boy Scouts, so that way when you graduate to now true moral science, you know what it is. So Prince Hall would be We Below, right? Shrinedom, or York Rite, true York Rite, which is real Scottish Rite, would then become the Boy Scouts, you know what I'm saying? And then, or Shrinedom would be like the Boy Scouts aspect of that, and then you would graduate from that into the temple as a Muslim now, who doesn't have to wear his thing in secret because he's been divinely prepared. Yet after 1950, the cutoff came, or we can even go back further. Once Pike got to the point where he could reorganize the whole thing, it was pretty much a done deal. But remember, if Pike was a Confederate general in John Drew's regiment, which was the Confederate Cherokee Regiment of North Carolina, then that means that he was under jurisdiction of a Cahokian Moor who had knowledge of himself and all of that, who was basically trying to uphold the remnants of the Confederacy. Therefore, he had firsthand knowledge of what the Moors and all of this stuff really was, which explains why he had so much reverent respect for the American Indian but could not suffer Negroes, and said that if a Negro entered into an organization and he He said, I entered the organization of white men. If Negroes ever become part of it, then that will end my membership. But again, we know what a Negro is. At this time period that he is coming into existence, the Negroes are all the imported white people and non-members of the government who were imported to kill and get rid of the rest of us, as well as the so-called undeclared Moors who are now really upholding the term and the role of what the Negro would be in the coming years. So by the time of Dred Scott, who some say is was the son of Emmanuel Moorally Bey, a.k.a. Benjamin Banneker Bey, we're still trying to verify that. But it wouldn't surprise me if that was true. But by the time we get to Dred Scott, when you do the knowledge to Dred, in that sense, in terms of this being a decision from 1828, he fell under the jurisdiction based upon what he said about himself. But he was still a plaintiff in error because regardless of who or what he was claiming, he still was always, the ancestors before him still were constituents of the original Confederacy and the original Republic. But today now, based upon people forgetting about the Articles of Confederacy, when you say the Confederacy or the Confederated or the Confederate government, they automatically think you're talking about slaveholding white males. And that's not true. By the time we get to the so-called white aspect of the Confederacy under Jefferson Davis, they just represented the white or Caucasian version of what was happening up top in terms of the northern counterparts to those so-called original black Republicans. That finally got unseated by 1861. You see? Dread also means awe. It's like a fear. Well, the definition is fear united with respect. You see what I'm saying? Terror. You understand? So when they talk about the war on terror, they talk about the war that they dread or the war on the dread. We know who the true dreadlock is. You see? So now dread, and we mix that or add that now to Scott. When we talk about the Black Scots, we talk about people like Kenneth the Dub, Kenneth the Niger, who is the descendant of Kenneth Dub, or Kenneth the Dub. Dub means more or done. Those were the Black Scots, the original Scots, the original people who had the Scandoon Stone and all of that. These original people, the ones who wore the tartans and the kilts and these are the descendants of the original Comesian, meaning Moors from the kingdom of Kemet over in what we now today call Africa. This was their descendants out of a people called the Colchian, which was a colony set up under Sesostris II. So the Black Scots, as we're talking about, in terms of matters of history, were the basically so-called sea warriors who were North African. But remember, North Africa, when we say that now as a Moor, and listen to show you a Moor. So when they talk about North Africa, you understand they're not talking about Morocco in terms of that little piece of the land right there. They're talking about anything west of Morocco and Mali. So they're talking about here. So they're talking about Black Scots who were here, who traveled again via Iberia into Europa. Because the dynasty that sent them over here, the Comesian dynasty that was over here, again, was running concurrently or after a point was reorganized itself and was in the method that it was here. That's why the Saqqara pyramid is younger than the pyramid of the Tehuantepec at the city of Tahuti, the pyramid of the sun complex under the so-called Maya or the Mayan Moors, the Tomoancan. Tomoancan Moors are the remnants of the empires from southern Atlantis, which were the Olmecs, the Toltecs, the Olmecs, Maya, Inca, Aztec, and Mixtec. By the time we get to Toltec now, this is in the late period in which now the Toltec Empire technically is the empire of the Moors that from Europa who married in, who again were German. The Germans was always our peoples. That's the irony in this whole thing. Like I said, go type in Bavarian Moors and look what you see. Or type in coats of arms of Bavaria. All you're going to see is Moorish crests. So when they talk about Macbeth and all of these people, the King of Denmark and all of these were black Scots. So we talk about Dred Scott, we're talking about all of the black Scots. You know what I'm saying? The original Scottish Rite, which is really the York Rite. Because the Yorks were the Moors who descended out of ancient Rome, who we know from the emperors Hadrian, Septimius Severus, and Constantius, and Honorarius, as well as many others, as well as the Pope at that time, who was Militatus. All of these black, the original pictures of the Council of Nicaea, you're only going to see Moors. You're going to see Asiatics. You're not going to see no white angels or none of that. All of these things came later and were adopted and put into work through the Catholic Church. Because the Catholic Church's job was to disseminate any and all information about any Moorish history and any Moorish remnant. They would create systems that would perpetually denationalize, that wound up in the culmination of our Articles of Confederation, while at the same time led to our disassociation due to so many of our brethren that was from over here working with these foreign Moors and putting them into servitude through the Barbary system of the pirates. This is why white people love pirates so much. You know what I'm saying? Because it allows them now to be in a situation where they were fighting for their own freedom from us. That's why when you see Pirates of the Caribbean, when they invoke the goddess Calypso, that was Olokun and Oshun manifested as a goddess, with the spirit of Kali that gave them the power of the seven seas. But after that point, in those movies, you see it went into Admiralty law, where the British came in and started reining in on these dudes based upon them abusing the trademarks. The trademarks were the letters of marque that were given to the privateers, the buccaneers, the musketeers, the privateers, and the rest of them, who in some cases were young white men who were slaves who were able to buy their way out of freedom. So a lot of the stories you hear about slaves here in America were almost triple when it came to what was happening to Europeans throughout the world in terms of this disenfranchisement between these Moors. So the Moors that wanted to come back over here had to all manifest and pledge allegiance to the Moabite. So this is in the old world, we could say that these were the Hittites, the Perizzites. This is where the term Perez come from. The Perizzites, the Amorites, and the Edomites, and the Elamites. Well, the Elamites, excuse me. All of these fell under the jurisdiction of the Moabites, who ruled that region through a kingdom called Petra, which was connected to the Nabatean kingdom, which some people refer to the Sabbatean kingdom. Saba and Sheba, the daughter and queens of Sheba, were also the daughters of El Seba, because El Seba or Bled El Seba, which represents the lands over here. So the daughters that were sent over here when the agreement was coming up, they had to be married to or come through the Moabite line, because that was the line of succession that they were starting to or naturalize these Moors who were now mixed with the blood of Cush and Ham. And due to their abundance of using slaves, white slaves and stuff like that, who they would sometimes amalgamate with, were now altering the genetics of the overall people. Therefore, they had to be vetted, which is why the dominant color on the flag of the Almoracan Empire or the Moabite Empire is red, with the green star being the center, because the green star represents the green dominant color on our flag, which was the obverse side or reverse side of that, because on our flag then the star is red, because the green represents our Islam or the isonomy or God or Osar or Il, right, or vegetation, money, whatever, purity, abundance. But the red star, five-pointed, represented the Moabite queen, because the five-pointed star represents the woman, represents the Moabite queen, you see what I'm saying, who were the key into helping bridge this gap. So by sending them over there, you see what I'm saying, to dwell in the kingdom of Axum, which out of Axum comes Abyssinia and then Ethiopia and then the Abbasid Caliphate and then everything else, we get then the original Christian, real Christians, the Coptics, the Axumites, who were basically practicing Islam in the form of the Coptic version, mixed with then their brothers, who was the Al-Islamic type, you see what I'm saying, who were also related to them based upon them all being original Axumites, and being that this place was called Al-Maghreb, Al-Aksum, see, Al-Sheikh Al-Meksum, Al-Amazon, or Amazon. This becomes the foundation point for all of these bloodlines to then be reunified over a course of generations to undo and redo what was the devastation that led to the destruction of all of this, which was the so-called fall of man, which we would understand as the fall of Lucifer, or what we would call the Yaqub experiment. So by the time these nations that had a preponderance of dealing with these other nations in that way kept working and using these slaves and sometimes interbreeding with them, there had to come a time where these genetics had to be separated. And this came the time of kings, or the great calamities in the old world, where all of these kings and wars and all that stuff started, because they got to start to get rid of all of these unnecessary niggas that's not only eating up the land, causing all the confusion due to the fact that they are remnants of this experiment, and there's a part of our overall human surface population that's down with raising them up and bringing them in, which at the same time is bringing us down. Therefore, we never was on some part and parcel shit. When you read about the Tower of Babel, you would see that any time that God, which is Rumaz Dubar, the original creator, is putting something out there, you know what I'm saying, you have man that's trying to force other men to do it. God don't do that. He sent a prophet to tell you what's going on. Man send the police or the army or the mercenary special ops, whatever, to enforce what, if it was pure, people would just want to do. Therefore, government always is a form of restriction on the liberties of low men. That's why there are hierarchies within the government. But in all governments, there is true jurisprudence that can be exhibited to all, if all attribute jurisprudence to love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality, which is what the Societas Republicae Lumenicanos Estados was founded on, which was then copied and mirrored in the earthly word republic and was then taken to all the places in the whole world. So when somebody says Roman to me today, I don't think about a Caucasian person like in Gladiator or something like that, or on Game of Thrones or something like that. I think of a so-called Latin person today from South America, because that's ancient Rome. How is it not if, one, we're calling these people Latin, and they're speaking a romanicized language, which is Latin. Two, they're called Hispanics, and the ancient Romans, any land that they went to conquer by force, they would label Hispanicus based upon the Hispanicus gladius, which was the sword that you see Gladiator holding in the movie, right? So they go Latin, they go Hispanic, right? And then the Roman is in the form of them being the predominant people on this side of the hemisphere. That's people in the Roman Catholic Church. So if ancient Rome was over here, that means ancient Carthage was over here. For more on this, you can see Clock of Destiny 1 and 2. But when people like Horace Butler or the Horace Butler with When Rocks Cry Out, or the Nagels, peace to him, put out Jive Turkey and all that, people want to act like that's somehow fiction. Unless you're a pilot, when you get in a plane, you don't know where you're going. You go up, but while you up, you be so far up that you don't know what's under you. You don't know where you at. And remember, I told you this whole thing is about a spell of disorientation. Therefore, if you are not relative to your geographic location and your gravitational pull and sphere, you are at the beck and will or call of anybody else. You just know where you wind up is where you're supposed to be. So apply that now to physical reality, and you will see how the reality itself has become a mirrored reflection or image of itself based upon it being turned upside down through the emancipation. But when we speak of the emancipation, we're not really talking about us, because we weren't slaves at the time, because we were in league with the British king, and all of the documents of the time prove it. So when you read in the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, up until now, a lot of Moors have probably been reading it from the perspective of the Alamanicanos and the British Empire being, or the Emperor of Morocco being the old empire, and it is. But the Alamanicanos they talk about is the Republic here. Therefore, that is an agreement between us and our cousin who was the king directly. You understand? Therefore, it was a confederation as well, and an association through amity, meaning through treaty. Wasn't the British the first people in the world of the European powers to abolish slavery and then go and seize Spanish, French, and British and ships that was dealing with it? So when we talk about old Denmark, when we talk about the original Dutch and all that, we talking about original black people. Originally, get the book Africa in the New World by J. Rogers. You'll see the original founder of Brooklyn was a Moor, dressed like a Dutchman. There are reports of, in Ghana, of Moors being at the king's court, and they was warlocks, meaning that they were animists. They didn't deal with traditional, what we would consider Islam like that. They was more on some like Black Panther type shit. You know what I mean? Using deities within the pantheon, but also relating them to totemic powers. But they still had Moors as wise men and advisors to their king, meaning that they were Moors too. They were just Moors who were practicing a different form. You see what I'm saying? But these Moors were still practicing Islam. They wasn't forcing them to do that, but they were still loyal to the king that they was advising. Because these kings were being brought up in the Moorish Empire, and therefore you always had to have a Moor as a tutor or somebody like that to teach you in the ways of how the greater empire would go. So when you went to these foreign lands, you knew how to deal with the difference between an emir and a caliph and a sheikh. You see what I'm saying? And a sultan and an eel or a bey. And then how to subjugate the Deys, who were the Mamluks or the Janissaries that came out of the perpetual slavery system that had been enacted from when the Moors went in 711. Isn't it interesting? The Moor pulled my coat the other day. He's like, ain't it funny how 711 is always run by some old Indian people in turbans and shit? And 711 was the same year that we entered into Spain and did what we did there. I was like, yeah. That is interesting. Because Hindus and Moors were the only ones that weren't under the jurisdiction of nobody in the world. Because the Hindus fought for their jurisdictional rights to be able to declared as Aryan, which is like when you Indian and you say you Aryan, it's like saying you a Moor kind of, or a Mahatma. Mahatmas, Maharajas, those were the Moors. But they were also the Hindus who could trace the original Dravidian Hindus that could trace their lineage back all the way to the wars spoken about in the Ramayana. It wouldn't be an India country today if it wasn't for Moors like Malik Ambar. Get this book or any documentation you could get on the Moor Malik Ambar under the name The Romance of Antar. The Romances of Antar. Read that. There's certain cafes and corners of the world where you go in the southeast like that, and you ask any because they have people in there that would just sit in the bar and tell stories and get paid. Ask one of the old men if you ever heard any of the Romances of Antar. Their own people don't remember that. This is way back when it was Bombay, not New Delhi. You know what I'm saying? But because they make the E or A, we think it's like, oh, it's Indian now. No, it's not. It's not. It's Moorish. Even the term Moorish. In any other instance, when you use the ish is like ism, right? And ism is man-made. But remember, as a Moor, everything that you do is perceived by your authority. Therefore, how you perceive the information in context, and based on love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality, God manifests that. You activate the isonomic energy within you that allows you to divine the very essence and truth of what it is. Therefore, even if it wasn't true before you, it becomes true after you acknowledge it being that. Therefore, the term ish with anybody else means like or kind of. But ish to us is the English aspect of the word Aish, A-Y-S-H. Therefore, when you apply more Aish, you see, get that movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and when the old slave white man is complaining about people, he talks about, oh, he asked the dude, he blind though, so he can't see nobody. He said, yo, Azim, that's a real interesting name. Like, what does that mean? You know? And he's like, what is it? Scottish? He said, Scottish? What is it? Scottish, Welsh, Norman? So this, again, shows you that in Scotland, Welsh lands, which is like Denmark and all that, Switzerland and all that, and in these places, that these were common names. You understand? He said, nah. So then the white man started complaining. He's like, he said, I'm just so sick of Saracens and Moors. He said, so what is your nationality? And then Azim walk up on him, Morgan Freeman walk up on him. He says, Moorish. He says, Moorish. But again, the Aish is the emphasis, because Aish is also Asia. See? So if we've already understood it to mean or be how do you say it? If we've already understood it to be us now, to them, they see it as what they want to see it as. You understand? That's the difference between Islam and Islamism. The ism, again, something man-made. You know what I'm saying? Now becomes our self-law master. Because we are the ones that dictate the tone of how it should be. You see? Aish is also in Hebrew, Aish HaTorah, which is like the flame or the fire of the Torah. So when we say that the Moors are the torch bearers, again, this is again, bringing it all back into existence, just like the original word Kira Artagi, right? Meaning keepers of the sacred fire. Mars being Moors, or Moors from Mars. Moors and Mars being the same thing, and Mars then being Aries, and Aries meaning initiation, and the Moors were the ones who first initiated these people, or what we call mankind, into the human family through the day ship that was created by proxy through the actual Yakub experiment. Yet, people don't want to get into this aspect of our history because, again, it's very touchy because it deals with the history of everybody else. So everybody else want to have their own version of who you are in terms of their mythos, but when you qualify who and what they are, the first thing they want you to start doing is throwing up proof. First thing they want to start doing is saying, oh, that's crazy. But the main people that's going to be telling you this is your own people. White people know what Crowley was talking about. White people know that Crowley, I mean, I can show you pictures where this dude looked like as dark as Khalid Muhammad wearing a turban. You know what I'm saying? With the hair coming out of it. You understand? There's no coincidence that he received his rulership of the Golden Dawn at Mexico in the Pyramid of Tahuti. Because there was people like him, Frida Kahlo, what's his name, Manuel Rivera, Trotsky. All these dudes was down with the whole sex ritual cult thing that they had working. So they would all go down there to do the rituals, and Crowley would be the ones to officiate in some instances. But while he was down there one year, this is the year that he decided, that they had to consecrate him, and then he became the Master Therion. And then as the Master Therion, it was his duty now to perpetuate the beast magic to bring about the gateway of the harlot of Babylon through the mystic rite of the 777, which again is the reorientation of a Moorish rite of circumcision. So a rite of circumcision is then bastardized by Crowley, L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons, and members of the Hollywood Malibu circuit who are now, have children like, Jake Gyllenhaal, Gwyneth Paltrow. These children are the products of this type of stuff. So way back when Salah ad-Din was doing what he was doing, and he finally kicked them out in 750 A.D., there was two types of Templars. There was the Templars who were black, and then there was ones that was white. The ones that was white and black, some of them engaged in homosexual ritual, right? But this was also a blind that was within the Templar order. The only reason why they was able to stay there as long as they did was, one, because they was Moors. They wouldn't be able to be there if they was just straight white people. I'm telling you. For Salah ad-Din, again, the way they depict them today, totally different than how these people looked at the time. But regardless of that, they was able to stay because there was a contingent of them that agreed to come back to the faith of true Islam. And so these were two separate acts. But to protect that from those new Caucasian knights that could not truly be Moors or whatever like that and practice true Islam, they then had an aspect of them. That's where the Baphomet satanic thing started coming in. So they said, we'll create all of these fake satanic rituals and let them think that Muhammad is that. But of the elect of those that see through those veils and see the real, we'll then let them know that it's really the mirror of Muhammad and the fact that we are Mohammedans and Muslims in the original empire that people are now starting to break away from, that is in peril. So they have to help perpetuate it again. So those two factions of Templars who started coming up in that faction or in those fashions manifested and still exist to this day. In the sense that there are those who believe that once you get the 96th degree in the order of Memphis and Mizraim, and then you go into the lycanthropy or the lupinism or the vampirism thing, and they try to get you to have sex with the hermaphrodite or the fallen angel or whatever it is they do. Ritualistically, they trying to get you to alter your physical body to the point where you become the living vessel of what the constructed trust is, a living dead vampirous organism that they now can use as a ghoul on the rest of humanity, damned by your own misunderstanding of true knowledge of yourself. Right? They trying to.
Hello, retrograde. Hope we're back on. Here he goes, y'all.
Yep. So I don't even know when this thing went out at this point. Like, alright. I don't even know where we went out. So if anybody can in the chat room can be like, what was the last thing you heard? You know? Anybody in the chat, let me know what's the last thing you heard. Okay, which one? With who? Anybody remember? Which sex ritual? I think we spoke about like 8 of them. Okay. Okay. Right. Now, being in a so-called order doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing any of that. Some people don't even know that this stuff like that exists in their shit. That's why they don't believe it, because it don't happen to them. But what does happen is that their energy is now attached to something that is malevolent. Because you don't know what god or goddess or demon or daemon that they invoke to make that happen. So like I said, there were 2 factions of those types of people. There were those Templars who under Salah ad-Din was under his jurisdiction. And was practicing Islam in secret. Then you had those who were practicing Satanism in secret when that was really created to protect the Islam. So the secret was in the M and the B. The true Templars of the Grail, who protected the Grail represented those bloodlines and those Moors nobles from who had their ancestry from over here, which by some people is called Elysium, or what they called the Kingdom of Heaven. So Jerusalem was supposed to be the repository of those remnants of that seed, those of us from over here, that resided out of Jesus' birth from over there. Iosus, or Jesus, was the product of the Holy Family coming out of David's line, but also through Petra, through John the Baptist. These people were called Nabateans or Sabaeans. These Sabaeans were also called the daughters of Seba. Bled El Seba, the land of the lawless, was here. The keepers of Seba came out of the Aksumite dynasty because they was connected to Al-Maghreb, Al-Aksum, Al-Aksum, the original Aksumites from over here. Therefore, the kingdom of Petra, when you look at those buildings and stuff, that you see in movies like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade that's carved in the mountains, and then you go to downtown Manhattan or New England, you'll see the same structures in terms of what we now today call brownstones. That's why no matter what color they call these artifices or these types of houses, they're brownstones. Yeah. So, with all of that being said, where was one of the places where most of these so-called brownstones were so lush and all of that that everybody existed in? Harlem, Black Wall Street, right? New England, Boston, Philadelphia. That's because we are, again, these Petrites and Nabateans and all of these people were Moabites, because the Moabite line was the consolidated bloodlines of all of those noble houses that went over there and wanted to come back over here, but had to be blooded in. So they adopt a red flag. Then eventually they put the green pentagram on it to represent that that's the star, the daughters that are helping them in their reunification. Because the daughters of Bledo Sheba came over there and then were known as the Queens of Sheba, who came out of a place called Meroe Kush and then married back into the Solomonic line, right? Which is why we see the six-pointed star and crescent on the flag of the Sephardi peoples, Moors of Granada, in 1474. So conversion to Christianity meant that you abandoned your estate to Christ. And as the vicars of Christ, they could then rule over you. That's why the first people, the Crusaders, the French Daves, slaughtered on the way to Jerusalem when they first got there was a group of Coptics because they mistook them for Muslims, for Muslims. It shows you that the Coptics and the so-called Axumite Coptics and the Al-Islamic Moors look the same. They're dressed the same, which is also why they had to paint their faces to get on the boat to be able to throw the tea off of it, because they had to look like the people who own the boats, because they couldn't go nowhere, because the people who owned them brought them there and held them for ransom until they could either pay their own debt, which was the debt of the 1666 Cestui Trust that was now being put on them based upon them being subjects to the jurisdiction of the newly formed United States that had to people itself not with people but with corporations. Because the original Cestui Trust, again, which was an ecclesiastical trust, was really set to benefit those Moors who would eventually fall out of their situation, who is us. But what they did was they docked us and then toured us, or when we were torn from our mothers, who then signed us up to become wards. So the nationality, which is bound by the father's origin, the nobility comes from the woman. That's why the man has to pay for the dowry to the family who produced the woman, because he's paying the family for producing the woman who will produce him a child, in which he will provide a dowry for the daughter, right, if his woman provides him one. This is why the father has to be separated, or the black family has to be disenfranchised and separated specifically, due to the old capitulation laws going all the way back to Granada. That's why most Moors go to Catholic school. Because that's what they decreed way back. So depending on what part of the country is, you are still under that jurisdiction. So like Florida, the Midwest, Florida and California and Arizona, all of that is Spain. So that's Moorish. Then the interior, Louisiana, St. Louis, all of that is France. Then you got England in the northeast, you see what I'm saying? In which then you, in a sense, fall under that jurisdiction, because that's really who you are. You're really the one that they first helped denationalize and work together to do while they were allegedly fighting wars against each other. So by no one else in history specifically, this was done to be able where you got to almost play Where's Waldo with your God, your nationality, your inheritance, and your birthright. So by prophecy and prediction, you were the one that this was dictated and ordained to go through this, based upon you being the one to right the wrongs of the original experiment that threw everything into Ra in the first place, which we represent as the fall of man. The fall of man led to the rise of mankind. The man that fell was the Moorish American national, man and woman. The dowry that is given, once accepted to the family puts into the trust of the children. That's how it's supposed to go. This is why no families are supposed to be broke, because this trust, when recorded and registered, allows you to use the trust that was set up for you, the estate, which is the name, you see, that at the time that it was founded, this agreement came through the so-called British or British Empire between the Alamadecanos, us, the Republic, and the so-called Britons out of Albion. So in this story of Jack and the Giant Slayer, Jack represents the lowly slave who was put in position to receive the crown by proxy. In the movie, you would see that the vines that sprout up also can sprout down when they're pulled down. So on first part of the movie, you see Jack trying to get up into heaven. Then at the second part of the movie, you see the gods now trying to go down. But the gods have been so disembodied from what the Moors did to them that they were now put into a form of savagery. This is visited also in the story of Prometheus, who was bound on the mountain and punished for bringing fire to the gods. The fire to the gods represents the government of men that were put over the Titans. Prometheus is pro me thus. Me, myself, and I. You understand? So the contingency that exists for us is to move past the anarchic form of dialogue that puts us at odds with each other and actually focus on that which makes us whole. And that which makes us whole is the fact that we are really a nation of which nobody else was put through this form of subjugation. A nation that gave so much to the world that is now not even just a mirror flicker of what it was. So the mirror image of the Moor is the Negro in the negative. So it was a story, it's actually a Ghanaian story, but it was translated in the Outcast album, I think, where the king one night was woken by a horrible dream where he saw the destruction of all his people and the outermost worst capabilities in which they had been stripped of everything, and they had no understanding of who they were, where they came from, what they had, how to use it, anything, and that they were put under the same jurisdiction that they had put the so-called descendants of the dead ones into practice, in which now the dead ones were lords over them, and that even their children were put into bondage and offered to the wild beasts and killed and all of that. So at the behest of his wife that he expressed the dream to, they both made love and agreed and hoped and propelled their love in the form of the blissful sleep they went into and imagined the universe in which we came out of that. And because they both envisioned that and dreamed that together, that it would be all right. And so as they drifted to sleep, about 2 hours later, somebody started crying out as somebody was trying to break down the gates of the city. So essentially, all of that is to say, that's an allegorical story, is to say that these things that have happened to us perpetually happen to us based upon us not taking it for what it really is, which was a lesson for us to come out of a situation that we have put ourselves in based upon what we think is going on and not what's really going on. And the only thing that's really standing in your way to do that is you, and that these little petty obstacles of going and doing the vital statistic thing and then, let's say, and deny it, there's remedies to that. But everything they do to deny what your religious exercise is a claim for you to receive benefit from once you get right. So to get right, there's a method to do so that a lot of the temples don't or can't give out due to a lot of the crazy stuff that a lot of these Moors are doing, and I commend them for that. However, there is still a large body of Moors that have the mind, the body, the spirit, the energy, who are young, who are old, who have the will to really do some of the things that need to be done to reinstate ourselves, to at least separate, not from our family or the place of our origin, but to go back to a place within it that allows us to be who and what we really are, so long as we observe these principles, to the point where we don't need certain things that people tell you you need because niggas don't know how to act. If there's no niggas around you, then the word would disappear. Understand? But until niggas understand that they're more than that, the word will survive. But it should, because I think it's going to survive enough to the point where these white people actually go back to the term, which is what they doing now through all these amalgamated verbs and all the stuff they think they doing to control us. It's really putting them further in our genetic debt. That's why within, I would say, 12 to 10 generations, there's not going to be really a lot of them left. That's why they're going so hard in the paint now. And they're using these new type of boule black person to perpetuate this new mythos and pseudo-monarchy over us, so that way we never look at the fact that we are our own queens and all of that today. I looked at this crown that this chick Beyonce bought for her daughter. It's like 50 G's or whatever. It's purple and all that lush. Looked just like the one in Jack and the Giant Slayer. And I'm looking at this shit and I'm like, why would you buy a crown for your daughter that she can't even wear? You know what I mean? If I'm paying 50 G's for some shit, I'm going to buy it at a size where she can really rock it. You dig? But she bought some joint that's not even the size of my daughter's head, and she bought a British type of crown. Because, again, these people are all subjects of the Jews, of where they did the paperwork and things like that from. So because they don't really understand where they're oriented from, and because they're not on the land, they have no place of domicile. And that puts them in a position to be listless, like a driftwood on the Sea of Commerce, which is beyond the sea, or what we call the Holy See or the Vatican Sea, that's spoken of in the English Sea Lesson, given forth by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and W.D. Falk. So all the little retrograde stuff that's going on now, just know that that's going to be over. But retrograde is also good for correction. So being that a lot of us are correcting what is out there and what has been put out there on us erroneously, we are essentially, by doing this, putting ourselves in a position. Like a Moore said, yo, Moore, I sent the thing in and they sent the thing back and they kept my money. Like, what I'm supposed to do? Like, they just not. And I say, yeah, but when they sent you the letter back, did they write your name on the birth certificate, or did they write your free national name? He said they wrote my free national name. I said, oh, so now you have a male in your free national name. So he was like, yeah. Like, oh, okay, so now when you go to the Social Security office with your other documents that state what you are, and they say, well, where's the evidence of that? And you provide mail, you now have mail from a government installation listing you with your free national name. So why shouldn't they change your Social Security to represent that? It's like, oh, word. He was like, word. I look at it like that. I said, I know, but that's why I would like to bring you through it, so that way you see that there's a method to this. But if you are looking at the apparent, you're never going to see what they're really doing. And what they're really doing is using your own energy against you. They're using your own frustration and your own money that don't exist against you. So once you, again, create the situation where you know where and what the Moorish Science Temple is, if you want to understand that, holler at me at houseofl@hotmail.com. And we can set up a private consultation and, let you know what the basic rundown is. And then if you want to proceed, then we can go further. We're taking applications for Moorish Science Temple 2A, of which I'll be the chairman and Minister of the Interior of the ministry, for Grand Sheikh Donaldson Bey. Blessed to him and his family. And at the Isle of Flower territories, we're going to do it right, man. You know what I'm saying? But we're not doing it on some, ain't nothing going to be done, Steve. Like, once it's done and you right, it's only right then to give back to the temple, which then allows the temple then to run and then help perpetuate what our ultimate goals are. And those goals can only be known by those of us that want to be a part of that. So it ain't no order, no secret society, and none of that type of stuff, because it's only Moors. Men and women, Moorish American nationals, Asiatics, and anybody else who may be Asiatic and don't even know. You dig what I'm saying? But there's certain principles and tenets that have to be upheld for us to be able to do that, and they correspond to what the Prophet was doing, or as best as we have comprehended it, what the Prophet is doing up until this point. So any nobles within the sound of my voice, or the voice of anybody that's telling any about this that's really on some tired of the bullshit, you know what I mean? Let's make something happen. Because most of the paperwork that need to be done nowadays don't need to be done with the government. It needs to be done between each other to be able to create a format for us to be able to do our own thing. Because, believe it or not, these practices not really your problem like that at this point. They just watching to see who's going to rise out the barrel for them to be able to be like, okay, these are these niggas to deal with. Are we going to be right or are we going to be wrong? But by that time, we're going to be so right that it's not going to matter. It's never about what they have done. It's about what we let happen or weren't in a position to stop, based upon usually our own shortcomings. And we still dealing with it. I'm still dealing with mine. You still dealing with yours. But if we can agree that that's the issue, then everything else is irrelevant. So if you want to be a Kemite, do all of that. But just know where Kemet was as opposed to Egypt. You know what I'm saying? And then we say, oh, well, they didn't use vowels. We didn't use. That's right. Y'all didn't use vowels over there, but we used them over here. You know what I'm saying? We did. Sorry, because we was more Phoenician and y'all was more dealing with what Ham and them was bringing after. But we all consolidated to get back together. So my flag is green with the red star. Your flag is red with the green star. Our flag represents those of us, the green with the red star represent those of us that was always here, time immemorial. And those of us with the red with the green star represent those of us that was from here at one point and went back over there and came back over here and whatever. That don't mean one better than the other, but it does mean that one represents the country or the country or the republic, and the other represents the empire. And then what binds them both is the Confederation or the Great Seal. And out of those came many different nations of kings that existed on both sides of the hemisphere. But for whatever reason, I could go to any scholar and he tell me all of this shit about Africa, but the minute I start asking him about the who is the Khan and things like that, and the Choco astronomy and things like that, he don't really know what I'm talking about. But if I say Dogon, he go with me all night. But then if I say Anasazi, what's that? See what I'm saying? That's not 360, that's 180. So he got to do another 180 to get to my 360, where by that time I'm probably on the 720 because I done double my 360. See what I'm saying? So that's the equation that I was talking to you about, the Jack and the Giant slave with the vines going up and then how they had to bring it down. The vines represent the DNA. And the vines that was coming up was these white people that was now put in a position because they was coming from a region of Albion called the Cloisters, which was an amalgamated Moorish empire, or amalgamated Moorish kingdom in reality. And you can see by the dress and all that. But they lifting this, they following the vines, which represent the DNA, up. Then they get to a point where they got to cut it down. So then that represents the destruction, cutting down the lattice. But then you have the point where the deformed gods or titans now coming and bringing the lattice down, bringing their genetics down to fight on the level of man, you see? All of these coming out of these black beings, these little black beings that represent the pineal organ. It even ends with them, well, I don't want to spoil the ending, but there's a scene towards the end where they focus on a pine cone, which is a symbol of the pineal gland in ancient Samaria, Babylon, which is brought back into the Moorish Empire under the jurisdiction of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian, who at the time Macedonia was in league with Carthage. Carthage is ancient Phoenicia. Phoenicia had an ancient god El that was adopted in ancient Kemet, now called Osar. All of that representing ancient Carthage and ancient Rome over here, which is why we have Carthage, North Carolina, and Carthage in Toledo, Ohio, all of this. Because all of that stuff was over here. So everybody check out houseofl@hotmail.com. If you want to email me about nationality or tarot readings or anything else dealing with that type of service, everything that's taken is taken as donation, which is a cot towards what we're striving to build out here. As well as you can check out www.darkscope418.com. Check out www.Aseer, thedukeoftears.com. You could also check out www.cookingmorewithless.com, as well as www.blackmambaworkouts.com. Oh, and check out www.sagaassad.com. Well, thanks and praise to the Creator and the Prophet for bringing us through again for another Moon Day night. Definitely push through the retrograde. Watch any little nicks or cuts or stubbing of toes or quick accidents, scrapes on the car. Try to just, maintain and think correct. The more correct you think, the more in balance you'll be. So, again, love and light. Thank you for the support. Anybody want to send donations, you can do so at PayPal through dukeoftears@gmail.com. That's DUKEOFTIERS@gmail.com. Thank you again for supporting us and supporting things we're doing. Any more questions, again, holler at me at houseofl@hotmail.com. Love and light to the human family of planet Earth. Up you mighty Moors. Inshallah, we'll get there together.